probably in any bit, competent, be the best. And the second is trust. And that's that rapport building, earning trust through transparency and being honest and always putting somebody else's needs first. Like there's a few, kind of common themes that have come out of this. And I hope that's given some indication as to like how we do business. I'm asked a question every day of the week, how's the market? To which my response is like, the market's good. It depends who you are. If you're growing a team, I think there's a great exercise, or even as an individual, to identify what your core values are. And so we went through this exercise early in my team growth career and identified kind of like the foundational core values were.
Mike's an absolute killer in the Hamilton market. I call him the surgeon of real estate. I'll let him tell his story about his background and his family background. But he became a friend of mine through Scott McGilvery. I know a lot of you already know Mike when you came in and saw The Secret Guests, and he's been at 14, 15 investment summits with me now up to this point.
Yeah, almost since they begun the network there. So it's 12 years.
And every time we go, we're competitors essentially because there's a whole lot of investors doing real estate. And technically we could be there and like, don't work with Mike, come by in London and surrounding region, back and forth, right? But like he shows me his back end, his action plans, his standard operating procedures. We've talked about issues with staffing. We've talked about, holding yourself to a standard. A lot of what we do at Prime is actually thanks to Mike. And I think a lot of the conversations that we have are valuable to this community. So I'm going to break it down so you know what you're going to listen to. We're going to talk about the state of the real estate market, a hard look at what that looks like, refining your business in tough times. So what it means to actually be a business owner and look at how do you look at your staffing? How do you look at restructuring for the next 5 or 10 years? And then I also wanted him to talk about the business side and the standard operating procedures, because I'm not even at his level. I know what I'm good at, which is marketing and getting a lot of attention for my clients and getting them more reach than they probably could on their own. He's an absolute monster on the back end at making sure that everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to happen. So Mike, why don't you break down first a little bit of your background? Why did I name you the surgeon of real estate? We'll start with that.
Yeah. I'd like to just get an idea of some of the audience. Justin indicated we've got some mortgage brokers in the room. Anyone team leads within that? Yeah. A couple realtors, a bunch of realtors in here. Any team leads? And then we've got some fly fishing. Who's a fly fisherman? Yeah, I'm coming. Justin's invited me. I can't wait to get out with you sometime.
Well, you grew up at Caledon, right?
So I'm a Hamiltonian. I grew up in Dundas, but great segue into my upbringing. I grew up in a family of medical physicians. My grandfather was a GP in Stony Creek in an era where doctors made house calls. And so, back in an era where GPs were known within their community, they'd make house calls, they'd deliver people in their homes. My father became a plastic surgeon in Hamilton. So when I was a young lad, I would grow up with him kind of, reminds me of you to some degree, taking videos of surgeries. Like we'd be eating dinner, pizza or spaghetti, and watching a major surgery that took place.
Wow.
But what I took away from that was like when there was a phone call late at night, somebody's life was on the line. A plastic surgeon in Hamilton doesn't do the same job that a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills does. So in Hamilton, it's things like breast reductions, not breast augmentations. It's things like reconstructive surgery. So my takeaway and the way I've applied that to my practice is fairly analytical. I think that's one of the reasons you call me that. But putting things into perspective. I don't save lives for a living. And when I get a call at 11 o'clock at night, somebody wants to buy a home. Put that into perspective with family and kids and so on and so forth. So I grew up in I'll call it a privileged environment, went to all kinds of school. I have a degree in engineering, economics, and commerce. So after all of that schooling, I thought, like, what do I want to do? What am I going to do? And I spent some time down in Panama and Costa Rica looking at offshore banking investment opportunities in my 20s. And I came back and thought, like, I want to get into real estate. And that began my journey. As a real estate broker. I thought I wanted to be a developer, kind of looking at, Kyle, and I think there's some developers in this room. But I found that some of my skills really were in bringing people together, putting other people's needs first. And I love the way you talk about social media. If any of you want to follow our Instagram, our social media sucks. I don't know that I've ever contributed a deal to our social media presence. We've built a massive referral-based business. So I'm a team lead within Royal LePage, which is the country's largest brokerage. There's 22,000 realtors across the country. and I run one of the top 10 teams with only 5 people. My agents are very productive in a per capita standpoint, and about a third of what we do is referral based. You won't drive through Hamilton and see a billboard or ads or social media. We're a relationship based business, and we've built a massive national brand. Last year I was named the country's Realtor of the Year within that network, based on doing things ethically. And I know we're going to touch on ethics, professionally, always putting the client's needs first. Like, that goes back to that upbringing where it was about the patient. It wasn't about the plastic surgeon and how great he was. It was about the patient's care and need, and having that mentality and bringing it into a service-based model, I think is really important, whether you're a mortgage broker or a fly fisherman, making it about the client. And I could go on a tangent there. I've got something relatable. We had a great family friend who was I don't know if he was a national or a international fly tying champion. I didn't know there's such a thing as a fly tying championship. So doing some fly fishing, fishing was one of my passions growing up. So, that's why I'm going to keep calling on you.
Yeah. So, and I do think you touched on a few things there that I want to highlight is, I think people get distracted in whatever business they're in, that they have to do everything. I got to do, YouTube. I got to do mailers. I got to do billboards. I got to do every social media out there. I got to put out videos. And I'm like, maybe you just got to do what you're good at. And when you identify what you're good at, and he's amazing at referrals, if you double and triple down on that, you have less stress in your life, right? You can use other people for leverage. And the way we like to do it, here's a very simple hack that you can steal, is we'll actually take every deal we did that year. I told Amanda this the other day, actually, after she sold Deerfield, which was a haul for her, was take all your deals, rate them 1 out of 10. 7's not an option because 7's not an answer. And then look at your 8 to 10s, and you're probably going to go search for more 8 to 10s. Look at your 1 to 2s. You're probably never going to want to work with those types of people again for whatever reason. Your like 4 to 6s audit is maybe there's something you could have done different as an agent to make that an 8 to 10. Maybe you didn't communicate with them enough, or maybe you didn't set expectations or whatever, right? Like, maybe if you take accountability, they could have been an 8 to 10. Like, they're the right type of person, but you didn't devote enough attention because you were dealing with too many 1s to 2s. And I think why I want to tie that into the conversation with you is, I think social media is something that it's great if it can amplify what you're actually good at. But I think there's a huge misnomer right there. There's a lot of people where in our industry, the celebritization of our industry among every other industry is such, a lot of the people that are deemed influencers are not actually doing deals, and they're not actually influential at all. And a lot of people that I know that are influential are not influencers, and they're not huge on social media, right?
Yeah, I think there's I've done this 20 years, and there's been a major shift in that. I call it ego ink in our business. We see it every billboard I pass by. I see a number 1 agent on every single billboard. I can't believe how many number 1 agents there are in the country.
I was number 1 last Tuesday for an hour in all of Canada.
So, that's my perspective, and I've never, used that in our business. I want to touch on something that you talked about that I love, and that's what I'll call like giving back. And I think you've done an exceptional job of building a great network early in building a team. So we were talking about this as well. Like, I've become a great team leader. My skills as a salesperson have had to shift into managing and running a top team. But early in the growth of our team, so if you're growing a team, I think there's a great exercise, or even as an individual, to identify what your core values are. And so we went through this exercise early in my team growth career and identified kind of like the foundational core values were, strong relationships and very effective communication. I'm going to come back and touch on communication point too, because that's important. And at the peak, we get like great excellence and results. But for me, our core value, and this is written on our wall in our office, is giving back. And it reads something along the lines of, we give more than we take in all aspects of our life. We give more to our teammates and our communities. It's who we're known for. And really my philosophy surrounding that ties into like prosperity. So for me to be prosperous, I have to give more than I take. And I'll give a few other examples. In my bank account, I need to give more to it than I take from it. In my relationships with my friends, colleagues, my kids, I need to give more to them than I extract from them. My health is the same. In order to be healthy, I need to give more to my health. So I think giving back really results for us. It has in some lovely prosperity, and that's really something that we've kind of instilled within the team. I see you doing a great job of that, Justin, here, with this network. You're not asking for anything. I'm not here looking for referrals, just want to kind of chat and kind of give back and hopefully see the industry elevated, from my perspective. So.
Yeah. Well, I think on that point too, like the relationships you have with people, if you said no, I wouldn't have been like, oh, Mike doesn't like me. And like my relationship changes. I think where people really get it wrong.
You've asked me 3 times.
Yeah, but I mean, no. It is what it is, right? Like, I think you really see who people are when the chips are down, and if what you're providing them or not providing them changes the dynamic of the relationship, right? I think people will be in partnership in different ways for different times. I mean, I'll talk about this later with you guys. Like, you guys can work with whoever you want. If there's times we're going to work on stuff together, great. If there's times they work with other people, my relationship with my network, which is my clients, my competitors, my family, the people that are in my ecosystem, isn't reliant on them providing me something. I think like what I'm trying to get across is most successful people that I know have created resilience within their own community in very simple buckets that they extrapolate to people around them. They hold themselves to a specific standard, and it's different for every ecosystem. So the buckets that I live by, faith, family, fitness, fun, finances, if I take care of those buckets in that order, I'm okay, right? Like if my heart's right with God, I'm in a good place to serve my wife and family. If they're happy, I can work out and not have to stress. If I can be in good shape, I can go do stuff, paddleboard, live my life, and then I don't hate my job. But we live it in reverse order where we hate our job because we're not having time to take care of those first 4 things. So like with what you've done, because the level of business you do is at the top tier, how do you manage those buckets in your life and still take care of those facets of your life?
You put it very eloquently. I wish that I could say I was as structured that I know those 5 or 6. Certainly I think it starts with self. Super important. As I got busier as I guess a trading broker, I found time blocking is super important. So, the engineer in me is very methodical. Everything's got an order of operations. I wish people could fit into a spreadsheet. They don't. People are unpredictable. I try to create as much predictability as possible. So I'm going to, I guess, just talk about like, the way that I manage life now and even growth through team that I wish I could give my younger self advice to is really that time blocking component, starting with self, ending with a nighttime ritual, all of that super important, block out some of that noise. I learned early on, I suspect a lot of you are in the business of being dinged often. You won't get a hold of me through Facebook or Instagram or email. Nothing will go off on this. So I've just made sure that I check every 30 minutes, especially when I'm with my kids. I've got 2 young girls. Where's the young little girl around here?
She's got Betty's little ones back there too.
So for me, that was really important. 3 nights a week, it was in my calendar to read with my daughters, carve that time out. And they're 10 and 12 now. Like, if there's anything I would do differently, I thought I would have more time with them later in my career. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah. I'm 12 years old, or them at 10, 12, 14, like they don't want to spend time with their father.
Already checking out.
So I kind of, if I were to look back, I wish I would have time blocked more of that because I thought it would be the second decade I'd get more time with them. But that time blocking component is really important. So, on stage stuff, as I block out my calendar, the beginning of the week is often on stage, get the team running. The latter part of the week is off stage stuff, for self, carving time for myself.
Yeah, I do think that's really important actually. And for this network, I'll put it out privately in an email. That is like the number one thing that's come up across all business owners that I've talked to is managing time, right? It's the one question that keeps coming up. I was asking this question in some entrepreneurial groups I'm part of, and it's a mixture of real estate, literally YouTubers, and then business owners. And it was that over and over and over. We actually have a separate list. We're not going to do it in person. It'll be on a Zoom where we're going to do a whole session strictly on time blocking in the front-loaded year. On how we map it out. And 2 hacks that I got that I'll share because you brought up the topic was from Sirhan himself. Because I'm like, how are you doing it? Like, I feel busy and I see you and I feel like my head's gonna explode. He said, couple rules. 1, your wife gets to veto anything after 6 p.m. You do not get to do anything. If she says no, you don't do it. He's like, I'll tell you a secret. 90% of the time she won't say anything because you're building, right? Like that's just part of it. But as long as she knows that she has that power, you'll be good. Second thing, show her your calendar 2 weeks ahead of time, or if you're in partnership, go over your calendar with your spouse or your partner. It is so important to know what's coming down the pipeline because then It's not like, hey, Justin, you have mastermind this morning. I didn't know it was happening, right? And literally this happened to me last week. Or FCC, when I was speaking at the event. I was in Toronto. She's like, what are you doing in Toronto? I'm like, oh, I'm speaking at an event. I'm like, I failed, right? Like, but having the system, 70% of the time, she'll know what's coming down the pipeline. The third thing was, and this was the super hack, so get your notepads, or if you're watching the replay, write this down. Once a year, take a huge vacation. I would challenge you to take 30 days and go do something. If you can't, do 15. Once a quarter, take 5 to 7 days and go do something. Go to Collingwood, go get a hotel, whatever, just get away. Once a month, take a 3-day weekend, and then once a week, do something that scares you. That was one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me, because then I started thinking of my buckets and my family, and like I used to have hobbies that were selfish hobbies, and sometimes still are, like fishing to clear my head. We'll talk about that later. But there's other things that I absolutely love to do with my wife and daughter. I'm like, you can actually integrate them, where now we'll go travel. We'll go to Florida, meet our referral partners in Florida, shoot some content, take a vacation, kind of be working, kind of be living, and ticking those buckets at the same time. But I think what you're talking about, at least mapping it out as a time block, you can see your calendar and you can control it a little bit better, right?
Yeah, I mean, you hit a lot of great points there. I'll touch on the communication point too. I talked about that being one of our values, and I've adopted that into our life too. And I use this as kind of analogy. Like when I'm communicating with myself, which we all do, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult is it? It's about a 10, right? I've got all these thoughts going through my mind at all times. The moment I add you into the mix, it's not like a 10 plus 10 difficult to communicate. It's more like a 10 times 10 becomes that difficult. And then so now on a scale of 1 to 100 for communication, whether that's in business, whether that's with your kids, whether that's with your life or your wife or family, the more people you add into that mix, like there's an exponential challenge on communication. If I showed you a chart that I sometimes show, it's like mind-blowing when you see that communication. By just adding 1 or 2 more people, it becomes extremely difficult to like make sure you get all your thoughts out. How many of us have been in the circumstances where you're like, didn't I tell you that, Justin? I thought I told you that. Yeah. I've walked through myself, I've got to tell Justin this, I've got to tell Justin that. So one of the things that we do in terms of time blocking, both family and business, is in business every morning we start the team off with a 15-minute check-in. And we go through like kind of the following 4, what did you do yesterday? Key metric yesterday. What's your focus on today? What's the key metric that you're focusing on today? So that we just know everything that's going on. Like I'll often be like, I've got to get this done. And I check in with my team and they remind me that they've got something way more important than what I thought was the problem. Yeah. So again, that's what did you clear yesterday? What's your focus today? Key metric, and what's your challenge? And we do that very quick in kind of just a quick blitz, 15 minutes every morning. And that's just like super key. So I've adopted that to our personal life. Yeah,
right? we do something similar actually on the red zone side of things with Kyle and the team. So like just with the files, like we're talking about you guys, be like, how do we move this ball forward? What can we do? And we're just catching up and reprioritizing to move the needle. But you're going to say on your personal side of things.
Same with personal side. Yeah. Start the morning out that way. So part of my morning ritual is 15 minutes with the kids. Awesome. Like it's crazy, right? But I just kind of remind the girls end my day the same way. Try to be home putting them into bed. So, just that check, because otherwise you're just missing. Like it can be in your calendar, but to open effective communication, I think that's really important, right? Listening and carving the time out for it.
Yeah, actually, we're going down like a heavy time blocking session, but you triggered something else in my brain that I heard that we do, and it helps, is a lot of times people are trying to map out their day, their week, their month, their year, but they keep thinking that they got to check in on their year like every week. Well, no, you only really have to map out your year once a year. You check in on your quarter once a quarter, and then you check in on the month, once a week, once a day. And I think that's kind of the format that you're giving. And I've seen consistent entrepreneurs that have found success. I know, Justin, you're going down this pathway with a lot of guys that you're in. Like I'm talking to Dan Martell right now. I picked up his book, Buy Back Your Time, phenomenal book for anybody looking to organize their life. And I caught him before he kind of blew up on social media. So we've been going back and forth for a while. And unequivocally, what you just described is one of the biggest things that has led most people to freedom, where it doesn't feel like you're drowning all the time in business and in tough economies and everything, because you are in control of your time deployment. And one more thing, Amelia Antonetti was on my podcast. Her episode drops, I think, next week. She was on Oprah, Dr. Phil. She built this incredible software for helping businesses manage human capital, meaning understanding where are they at in terms of their life, their marriage, their health, like everything else besides work, because it actually makes them more productive at work. And she said something that was fascinating. She said her executive assistant runs her calendar, and she figured out she has 800 weeks left in her life. She's like, kind of a morbid thought, but she's like, I did the math, and that's how much time I have left, short of a meteor falling on me tomorrow, which is one of my favorite things. And she said, my EA doesn't run my calendar. She gets to deploy the 800 weeks of my life. So it's incredibly important to have purpose in how you're deploying every second of your life and where you're deploying it, which kind of leads me to the second part of my conversation. I do want to touch first on the real estate market, but then I want to dig into restructuring your business for the future, because I think a lot of people have gone through that over the last year to 2 years, really taking a hard look at what does my business look like? What does my team look like? What do my systems look like? Let's preface it with the current real estate market, and we're not going to sugarcoat it and be like, when's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday. When's the best time to buy? Today. Like, we're not those salespeople. We are consultants in good markets, bad markets. What is your thoughts on the current state of the real estate market? And then we'll get into the business side.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a big get together Thursday night for many of our investors, and I'm data driven. So for those of you that are in real estate, we have access now to some interesting tools post-COVID. So like, I look at that data, I lay it all over, and I'll speak to the Hamilton market, because I don't know London, I don't know Grand Bend. We're in a pretty soft market. In fact, we're in the first time that we're cusping into a buyer's market that we've seen in 20 years. So when we look at buyer demand, some interesting metrics we look at. In the peak of the market, there was about 10,000 showings being booked weekly. Last spring, there was about 6,000 showings being booked. So, there were 60% of the buyers that were out looking in Hamilton. In the fall, we went through one of the slowest markets we've seen, where we had about 1,200 showings booked per week. And today we sit at about 3,000 showings per week. So to put that into context for those that have been in the business for the last few years, if 2 years ago was the pinnacle, 10,000, last spring we were at 60% of that. Last fall we were only at 12% of that. Crazy. So very little buyer demand. And today we stand at about 30% of that peak. So, I'm asked a question every day of the week, how's the market? To which my response is the market's good. It depends who you are. In a seller's market, it's a great market if you're a seller. In a buyer's market, it's a great market if you're a buyer. So I don't say that to sugarcoat it, to say that it's a good market. Sure. But, I see opportunities out there right now where we're negotiating at 85% of asking price for our client. So whether it's your matrimonial home or an investment property, I think some people just kind of, what's the term I heard? Sheeple. A lot of people just kind of follow the herd. If we're talking residential homes, I think it's a great time to move up. Yeah. If my $1 million home has lost 10%, but I'm moving into that $2 million market and I can gain 20% or 200,000. Sorry, 10% on $1 million is 100,000. So I've lost 100,000 on my matrimonial home, but I'm moving up into that $2 million home, so I'm saving 200,000. It's a great time to make that move up if you're a buyer, in my opinion. You commented saying you think we're going to be in this for a little while, and I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would pick lottery numbers, not housing prices. I think the state of the economy, so some of the stuff I do with LePage is pretty interesting, and we get to hear from the CEO of Royal LePage Canada is a really interesting guy. Phil Soper's his name, and he's named the most influential Canadian in real estate, and this is on a global perspective. If you get a chance to listen to him or follow him, is a fantastic communicator. And often when I chat with him or listen to him, he's talking about the economy. So default rates, for those of you that are in the mortgage business, there's an article that went up past week, past week. Right? Yeah. They're sitting at, went from 0.17 to 0.17 to 0.2. So that means there's 20 people in 10,000 that are defaulting on their mortgage. In the U.S., that's 364. So our default rates, when you're reading this in the media, to put it into perspective, that's still what's the math? Help me on this, Kyle. 1/10. A 10x default in the U.S. As Canadians, we're known to pay our mortgages. We're very conservative. So I don't believe that we're going to see, I think we've seen the major correction that we've already, that we're going to see. We've seen about a 25% correction. We're seeing prices in Hamilton, and I'm speaking the Hamilton market, hold relatively true. We're 2% up year over year. So, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. I think if you look at some of the economic trends, unemployment still at 6.2%, GDP's down a little bit. What did we do? We let 1.2 million newcomers into the country last year, and they typically fall within the Toronto area and sprawl. So until we fix some of the red tape surrounding construction, I think a long-term forecast on the housing market is probably pretty strong. We've got a major housing shortage. So, I think it depends who you're talking to. How's the market? Well, if you're a seller in the luxury market, it's probably not that great.
Yeah.
If you're a buyer and you're looking to get into the market, it's the best time I've seen in 20 years from a absorption rate standpoint. So, we all need housing. There's a massive shortage in housing in this country. I'd love to hear your perspective, but I'm relatively optimistic.
Yeah, I still own prime real estate, so I'm fairly optimistic because I didn't sell the company yet. I think you touched on a lot of key points, right? I do think when I look back to 2020 to 2022, 10,000 showings and just the increase in prices, I think what we saw was the showings that would have happened 2020 to 2025 happened in a 2-year window. And then I think we saw something happen that we've never seen before where all the businesses got shut down. We didn't know what was going to happen with the world, and just a very tumultuous environment on top of them printing an insane amount of money, which they're now trying to recapture through capital gains tax increases in different ways. Because guess what? The government's not profitable. I also think, we have a housing crisis, but it's okay. They're going to help. They're going to build the houses. I'm like, they're not builders. Like, Paul, you're going to build the houses, right? Like, not them. But they don't understand is the economics of them building doesn't make sense because they have land costs, they have hard costs. Sure. And if they're going to make buying homes so unaffordable that it kills people's buying power, they're going to sit on the sidelines and they're going to wait. And the builders are going to wait until the market's viable and it makes sense. And then they're going to build the product. And what's going to happen is their inventory of homes is going to dwindle very quickly when the buying power comes back. Because I do agree with you. I think right now, maybe 30% of buyers are actually in the marketplace. That's approximately my number off the last update. You can check the tape. I said this on a video. I think if they do drop rates in July, which I didn't think they would, but now with the people I'm talking to, they're like, yeah, they very well may, and they do it in fall. So bring back another 10, bring back another 10. We know that we live in one of the best countries on the planet. We have energy, we have food, we have somewhat rule of law compared to a lot of the world. And we've said this at the last mastermind you were at, Mike, that I think ultimately the demand is there. It's just they have artificially suppressed it. And I think once that housing supply dries up, I think it's going to be a competitive marketplace. And I think there's going to be two options for consumers. I think you're going to rent from the corporations, from the government, or from the people that own the properties, or you're going to buy. But the disparity between ownership, and that's why I do these podcasts to have this conversation, isn't to say buy now, buy now. It's just more tactically, if home ownership is something that you want to get into, think about emerging markets. Think about what does the future look like of real estate. And I don't have a crystal ball either, but I'm seeing the same market dynamics as you, where there's never really a bad time to buy or sell. There's just bad strategy. And you said 85% offer price. The stat in our market's 98% list to sold price ratio. So $1 million home, sell for $980 roughly. I had a client ask, Ryan's not here yet, but he's coming. There's a property listed for 159, talking to this guy. He is an awesome client, great family. We already have their house appraised, ready to go. They listed this property. They had like 9 showings, gave them an offer. It was a great offer. And they're like, no, we have too much showings. We don't want to look at a home sale condition. And they got super cocky. I was like, let's watch it. It's been a month. The agent came crawling back to us. He's like, what do we offer now? I'm like, 1.2. And he's like, what? 1.2. I'm like, with your home sale condition, your financing and your inspection. I said, I bet you we get it like 1.3, 1.4. And they probably would have had a deal at like 1.45, but they got greedy. And I'm like, they're not in any type of position. And guess what? If it sells, who cares? There's going to be more inventory. And that's where, again, strategy from the buy side. But if I'm that agent on the sell side, you have to have an aptitude and a skill set to be able to turn around and fight and justify the price that if the 1.2 comes in, that you're going to get that 1.45 back on the table. And that's where on the agent side of business, which we'll get into, I think you really do differentiate yourself, that it's not just a transaction for you, right?
Yeah, as you're sharing that, a few things kind of go through my mind. And I think one of them is like professionalism. Like you talked about that market in 2020, 2021. And what those of us saw that were listing properties, like we had 20 offers come in, and I use a visual, like here's market value, the dartboard. Like of the 20 offers, 15 were right around market value. And then 1 or 2 of them shouldn't have been at the table. Like we saw that. But then one or two of them were so strong that they were like 15 or 20% higher than the masses. And unfortunately, I think there's like, I call it fiduciary duties, which it's actually technically called, but that you use language like the consultant's approach. Mm-hmm. Like it's our job to advise our clients and set them up for success. And for those agents that were 20% higher than where market value should have been, like they're going to be gone. Their clients are ticked at them, because they're chasing a commission check. They're probably underwater on that property because we've seen the market adjust, or a bubble burst, if you want to use that terminology. And I think there's a major opportunity for those professionals that are skilled to pick up market share. Like we're picking up market share right now, like crazy. Primarily because we have a strong foundation of like a consultant's approach. So like valuation, if you're a realtor and you don't understand how to value properties, like hone in on that skill right now. Because if you're overpricing a property, like I don't want the liability. Because I know I'm going to set the client up for a poor relationship. Like our mission is to deliver a 5-star experience worth telling friends and family about. If I list your property for 20% more than market value, and we don't get it sold and we start to chase down the market, like how am I providing fiduciary duties to you? And in fact, I'm becoming a liability. And we're probably not far from a time where some sellers start to go after their broker for damaging their listing. Heck, if I was a patient of a surgeon or any other professional had damaged me, there's going to be liability there.
You're seeing that in the States heavily with the NAR lawsuits and everything happening. And I think we saw a rush of agents from 2020 to 2022 get into the industry, the TikTokification of real estate. They watch 4 episodes of Selling Sunset and they're like, before I learn how to write a contract, I got to go get a lifestyle shoot in front of a car, right? And start banging.
I love that. My lifestyle isn't going out for lunches or dinners. Like I
know you dress pretty well. I've seen you out and about, but yeah.
Yeah, for first impressions, I guess. Yeah. I didn't realize you guys would all be in your Hawaiian shirts.
I should have said it. You're fine. It's a representation of who you are, but I think the point of what he's saying is to like, it's a moving target too. Like a lot of times the relationships we have, we're investing in sales and we sell very unique properties. The valuation sheet that we have, I don't know if you guys know this, part of it comes from Mike. Like that's the level at which we share, where he's shown me his valuation and how he does it. I've shared with him the back end on a lot of what we do. And it allows us to go back to our clients and say, okay, here's everything that we're competing with on the market today. If new comparables come up, we can adjust it and say, this is what we think now, but we're not the buyers for your home unless it's this one. We're there in the trenches with you. And I think I've said this to clients before, if you don't trust me, I can't help you, and I'd rather we don't work together and we stay friends than you just stay tied to a contract just so that I can have a sign in your lawn. And those agents, the last part of this conversation, and then we'll get to lunch, around ethics, you and I we talk every month, and we're always like, we got to meet, we got to collaborate. Now we're here. I genuinely think there's going to be a culling in all industries, from mortgages to real estate to building to pretty much every industry, because that 2020 to 2022, just the market was so fat, you could fall out a tree and hit a deal. I think you're going to have to work for it over the next 2 to 3 years. But then I think the next 5 or 10, that's where we're going to see that next really big rush. So I guess, what are you doing to prepare you and your team for this next season of life? Maybe touch on that.
Yeah, you probed another good nugget for the realtors and maybe mortgage brokers in the room, or I'll tie it back into communications becoming a theme. We've gotten away from when I started doing this. We would sit down with the sellers and we would present the offer to the sellers from the buyer's position. And I've been thrown out of homes. I've been called every bad name you can imagine. And
we used to be a bouncer in Hamilton, so that's okay. He was throwing people out before, so.
And we've lost that opportunity. Like there were, back to that 2020 time where there's 20 offers. It was just like email it in. So when we're presenting right now, we're using Loom. I'm recording a video to the seller. Yeah. And I'm walking through valuation. Like that valuation is so important. And I had an experienced agent on the other end of this deal last week. And like when we got the deal done, he followed up and he's like, dude, that was badass. He's like, I've never seen anybody present an offer through Loom like that. Smart. To communicate to their agent. Because like when you're the selling agent and you present to the seller and it's a lowball offer, like now your clients hate you. You're losing rapport. So using technology. So how are we preparing for this next season? I'd say like doubling down. Yeah. Hard work. We talked about this and we haven't even really touched on hard work yet, but this is an industry full of hard work. Like I work way harder than my father did as a surgeon, saving people's lives, right? I work all hours of the day. I work 7 days a week. So the success is the byproduct of hard work. I believe that first and foremost. Yep. But professionalism and honing in on those skills. So whether it's valuation, whether it's negotiation, building rapport. Like how do I build rapport over an email or over an Instagram message? Like it's a face-to-face conversation with clients, sitting down with clients, earning trust with the other broker that you're doing business on the other side of the table with. So, we're talking about that, like hosting events like this. You're building massive rapport now, being face to face with everybody. And I have a keynote that I talk about, growing up in the 80s, why it prepared me to be successful in this market. And a few of the things I use, like one of them is like influenced by WWF and all that. I won't go down that path.
That's awesome.
But the other is like, that was an era where you had to pick up the phone to build relationships with your clients.
Yeah.
It wasn't done through email or text or DM or having, in my opinion, a great social media presence. Those are amazing tools to stay front of mind. But the people I trust most, I often spend time with them.
Actually, that's the other reason why I do these. We did way too many this year, and I got to like rejig the calendar. But I like seeing people, right? Josh, I haven't seen you in forever. We talk every now and then. And Josh used to live with us, right? Like I've known Josh for 20 plus years. And Tommy Waite, the chef that's here, like Tommy's family. He's an incredible caterer, runs an incredible operation, and full-blown businessman now that I respect. But it's a way of, you find your people, and then your people find your people, and that's how you do life, and that's how you do business. I think you touched on that. I think we did go through a phase where the corporatization of real estate, or everybody, you're just a line on an expense sheet, and you're just a name on my profit line. There's businesses that run like that, but I think we are going back to the days of making specialists much more valuable at what they do and paying people what they're worth, where before there was just so much business, you barely had time to breathe, let alone get into community with people as well. I think on the business side of things, well, you talked about the hard work piece. That's another message I'm really trying to get across, because I feel like people want it fast, they want it quick, and they want it easy, right? We're addicted to instant gratification, allergic to accountability. And then we wonder why there's no longevity in this business. You talk about presenting offers to agents. I'm looking at Vanessa and Rob on the back end. And when they came at Prime, I've been involved in a lot of negotiations with them and seen how they present. We've tactically talked about it, strategy, how do you present? And I'm like, draft an email, call them, hammer them with it, then press send, because they won't remember anything you said. And they need to translate that to the agent. The Loom video idea for anybody here, massive takeaway. Loom is an app you can put on your Google Chrome. It screen records you talking. We use it for appraisals and updates sometimes when we talk with clients where you're too busy for an update. I'll shoot a Loom for you if you want. And I'll say, here's quick CMA 3-up, average price point. Here's your competition. Here's what I think. Because I don't want to inject myself in your calendar for 30 minutes because you're busy. And you can watch it with Chelsea 4 times over when I'm not there, formulate your own opinion, and then we're on the same page. Like, you can use technology and tools to become more human. Or you can let the tools use you, and you become addicted to doom scrolling TikTok and feeling bad about yourself because your competitor just listed a house, which is, you got either choice, right? And I think the way you're using tools is really smart.
Yeah, I mean, the technology is there to assist and increase productivity and efficiency.
Yeah.
But, to comment on that specific point, like, I'm not going to rely on you conveying my message to your clients.
Yeah.
Like, your clients are going to hear my message from me, and there's going to be a little bit of fear. Like, I'm using pain and pleasure in negotiations. So, like, master your craft. I would boil it down to 2 things. Probably in any business, be really good at what you do, be competent, be the best. And the second is trust. And that's that rapport building, earning trust through transparency and being honest and always putting somebody else's needs first. Like, there's a few, kind of common themes that have come out of this. And I hope that's given some indication as to like how we do business.
Yeah, actually, I was going to end it, but you said something I want to touch on beforehand. The mastering your craft piece, I think, is so important. Master your craft, right? Like, how do you become a good fly fisherman? You go to the river, you suck at it, your reel blows up on you a whole day when you're with your friend. Like, you end up in terrible weather, and then you go a day where you don't expect it, and then you catch the most beautiful fish when you didn't expect to catch a fish. It's the same thing in your business. How do you master your craft? Like, how do you become amazing at real estate, knowing valuations? Like, what do you do to actually master your craft?
It's like you hear it in the sports analogy, but I can go back to early days in the business, like wanting to be a top producer. Like, I knew where I wanted to go. And when I had time, nothing but time, I would drive all these neighborhoods and be like, oh, that's where Hope Street is. Or, just kind of get a feel for the grit in the neighborhood. Like, I guess you could call it work. It didn't really feel like work.
Sure.
Like, this is work.
Yeah.
Right? So I think find something, and to that point, how do you master your craft? You have to love it. Find something that you really enjoy doing and make it so it doesn't feel like work. And if you can do that, like you've talked a bit about life, like how many weeks are left, et cetera. Like, what I do every day doesn't feel like work. I love what I do. I couldn't imagine being a teacher and going into a school, or like, that's just not for me. I couldn't imagine working for somebody else or in a factory. So like, finding something that you're really good at that doesn't feel like work makes it a lot easier to master. And then just repetition. Like, I'm going to do it more than anybody else does.
Yeah, and I absolutely right. I think being aware of your skill set. When I talked about tracking your deals, 1 out of 10, 7's not an option. You'll also see patterns. When I talked to Amanda about it, I was like, right, what did you do well? What did you do poorly? What could you improve on that list? And then when you look at 100 deals, you'll see you consistently do what things you're good at over and over and over. You consistently do the things you suck at over and over and over and over. And guess what? You can hire team members and assistants for that kind of stuff or outsource it so you can do more of what you're great at, which will attract more of the right-minded people, right? I think.
Yeah. One more great comment on mastering your craft there is having that external ability to look at what you did wrong, right? So if it's fly fishing and you're just like, I've got this, I'm so good at this. Like, you've got to have this,
Till you're not.
move out and be able to analyze. I see some of our newer agents going like, I did nothing wrong. And I'm like, well, you didn't get the listing. It's like, let's reflect upon this. Like, have some external reflection as to what you could have done better. And, I would say become obsessive. Like, if you want to master your craft, like, obsess about it.
Yeah, and there's perceived loss too. Sometimes you don't get a listing that wasn't the right fit for you. I think that sometimes you get a client and the price doesn't match the value, or there may be a 2 or a 1. That's okay, but there's still something you could have done to improve your process. And I think if you're not shying away from the ego part of it, where, well, like when I train the team, we do it on Tuesdays. We sit down and we hammer through hard topics. And we'll ask questions like, what are you struggling with around this topic? I used to go in and I'm like, here's what you need to know. But I'm like, there's people that are smarter than me that I have access to. So maybe there's somebody that is really good at this. We'll compile those questions. I'll go out, ask those people, and then bring it back as a collective. There are things that I have skills at or experience in. Here, I'll share this. But man, the community ability to level up through proximity, like even you and I have no vested interest in your firm. You have no vested interest in mine. Like, we're going to be at a huge summit in September. I'm looking forward to that because every time we spend time together, we leave and we're like, I feel invigorated that I have somebody in my community that can give me an outside perspective and say things to me that might be hard to hear, but make me at least think about my business. And maybe I take the advice and change some things. Maybe I don't. But I think having honest relationships with your clients and competitors and collaborators is super important.
Yeah. Yeah. A great point. Surround yourself. I mean, we see each other a couple of times a year. We hop on a call a couple of times a week, every couple of weeks. For sure. So surrounding yourself with those that inspire you, it feels kind of so, obvious. You hop on, I don't have TikTok, but TikTok, Instagram, like you hear it consistently. Yeah. But I think some of it's just making sure that it resonates with you and being passionate like this, whether it's real estate brokerage, mortgage broker, like sometimes you're just not the right industry for you. So finding what you're good at. So whether it's analytics, property valuation, or whether it's like relationship building, right? So finding what you're good at also has to be a big component of that, and leveraging what you're good at, or taking what you're good at and leveraging other people for what you're not great at.
Yeah, and not being afraid to, right? Pay for value. I think when you look at your community network, pay a good builder to build your house. Pay somebody to teach you something and save you that 10 years. If I didn't go out with you the first time, Mike, like, I could only imagine how bad my cast would have been if I started boxing and I just went to the gym and started developing bad habits. Those are now my habits. I think that's the community that we're going to see moving forward. I also think that's how we get back to a productive society is what you've done with the company that you started. Like, your brother cuts my hair. We're buddies now, and we've talked back and forth quite a few times. You're providing good service, and now you're extrapolating that to a community of people around you. Like, it's incredible how, and this is going back to the Grandman Facebook group's comment, it's incredible how if you shut the noise out and you just focus on keeping your ship tight, the hatch is battened down, the storms come, everybody's going to take care of each other through that storm. And on the other side of it is smooth sailing. So I appreciate your time. I want to be respectful of it. We're over time, but anybody that wants to meet Mike after, I'd encourage you to connect with him, get his number. He's an absolute monster out there too, and wealth of knowledge on the business side. Systems and operations. He's one of the best ever. So I appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thanks for having me.